Hi, this is Brendan Davis again from Bedrock Games and the Bedrock blog, and today I want to talk about taking a page out of the director Chor Yuen, and in particular the movies he's done that are based on the works of Gulong, or where Gulong is served as the screenwriter. I think that these films, and I'm not going to go over all of them, I'm just going to go over a couple, and mainly ones I've already spoken about here, but I think these movies are really good examples of a martial world populated with stark characters that are memorable and and generate a lot of interesting conflict and challenges for a party. And it's a world where you can see player characters fitting into it quite well. So the first movie is Jade Tiger, which I haven't spoken about before, but this one's really excellent, and it's a good example of sort of conflict between two sects and a revenge plot. And the revenge plot's really interesting because I won't give anything away, but there's a unique twist right in the middle that just totally changes the whole shape of the movie. And you know, again, it's Chor Yuen, so it's gorgeous. The final scenes especially are really visually compelling on screen. But this is a very good example, I think, of what I'm talking about, where you have two clearly defined sects. You can kind of see how the hierarchy works. You have a bunch of characters that are memorable because they stand out in some way, that, you know, whether it's they're over the top or they just do something weird, or there's just something about them that really sticks in your mind. And I think in a game that's really important. It's really it's really hard when you have a Wuxia campaign where there's just character after character after character to get players to remember all the characters. So sometimes you do it with their weapon choice, sometimes you do it with their clothes, sometimes you do it with the events themselves. But really, clothes in a tabletop campaign, people don't really remember that unless it's something truly wacky, like, you know, he's got polka dot, you know, robes on or something, which I'm usually reluctant to do. But what they will remember is like over the top, insane personality traits. So again, I like, you know, just like I like my villains over the top, I like my martial heroes a little bit over the top, a little bit, you know, you might say campy, but I think in tabletop that works great. So, you know, someone who, I don't know, like someone who just is very polite and calm, but there's one thing that just sets them off and they go crazy. That's the kind of character I'm talking about. Something where when the players encounter them, like, well, okay, I'm going to remember that guy. I'm not going to do that around him. So, you know, whether it's that or whether it's like, you know, a flesh-eating grandma or whatever, just something that sticks in people's heads. So this is another one, and it's a great movie, and I think the ending is especially really nice to watch. And it's kind of got like a touching. I think this is one of the more effective Chor Yuen endings for me. I don't know why. So this one I spoke of already, so I won't really go into detail with it because I got another video. But this is another example of a Chor Yuen and Gulong sort of combination. And I think, you know, if you saw my previous video, it's just got, again, it's got really great characters and intriguing reveals. So I think, you know, this would be an easy one to take a page from, and it kind of shows sort of the perils of being involved in the martial world to your personal life. So, and so this one is one of my favorites. This is Killer Clans. I've talked about it on the blog. I don't think I've talked about it here. This one is again, it's rival clans, but this is brutal and dirty and like just filled with nasty characters. So I mean, you will not forget. I mean, there's a lot of characters in this. It could be a little confusing at first, but every important character sort of stands out in a way. So you have like this really terrible madam who runs the brothel, who's outrageous and very memorable, but she has a secret assassination squad that she manages. You have this sort of a drunken hero who's just always sort of musing on a bad romance that he had, and you have really, I won't say which one, but one of the masters of the sex is just like scheming and just thinking ahead like 8 steps all the time and willing to go to such lengths just to survive. And then you have people who are just you know, just willing to portray their own uncle or father. So it's a great movie. It's a violent movie. It's a dirty movie, but it's It's one that I think it gets like the grime of the martial world, and sometimes you need to show that. Sometimes you need people to be unlikable, and sometimes you need players to see that their actions, have reverberations in the setting. And so this is a kind of movie that would really, I think, help with that sort of development in a campaign. Legend of the Bat's another good one. This one I think is just visually stunning, which probably isn't much help in a tabletop campaign. But it's also got great set pieces and locations, so it's a good example of sort of how to blend all that with maybe stuff that's a little more dungeony or just location based. And it also, again, this one has the characters to it. So, and I have a review of this one up on the blog page. But it doesn't have to be these movies, by the way. These are just 4 examples that I kind of pulled randomly off my shelf. But Chor Yuen and Gulong, there's anything with those two names on it, or even just one of those names, I think you'll have a very rich world to pull from in terms of characters. There are other great directors who I've talked about. There are other great Wuxia writers who I've talked about. I just think in terms of characters that work well and are gameable, for some reason this movies like these ones really resonate with me. And somebody might have a different experience. I mean, if you look at like Legend of Condor Heroes or Return to Condor Heroes by Louis Cha, those have great characters too. So I don't want to say like this is like the only director writer combo that has good characters. I'm just saying something about the way it's done here. For me, I can easily translate that into gaming, and I think part of it is Chor Yuen makes really great use of sets, and something about filming on the sets, it feels very contained, and you feel like you're in this martial world. When you watch the movies, you're transported there. And sometimes when directors use the real world as visually beautiful as it is, it maybe feels more real worldy to me. I don't know what's going on there, but I just know when there's more sets involved, I'm a little more immersed in the martial setting for some reason. And also, again, the characters pop out. They tend to be really over the top. Sometimes silly. Like, Gulong characters are like kind of dark, over the top. They're just, to me, it almost feels like a Wuxia setting populated by villains, which is kind of how I think you want to approach these things. And when I say villains, I don't necessarily mean everybody's all bad. I mean everybody is they kind of have like 1 or 2 traits that really stand out and really define them clearly. And in a campaign, again, that's super important because players will remember that. They'll remember the character. Like I said, you got personality, name, and maybe weapon. If you're lucky, they'll the clothes will be memorable and the events will be memorable. But and martial arts techniques. So whenever I want characters to remember somebody, I make a point of giving them a striking personality or a weird disposition. I give them a technique that'll stand out if they do something weird in combat. Because again, a Wuxia campaign, you're going to have a lot of fights, and that's your opportunity as a GM to make an impression with an NPC. Sometimes that NPC dies, and it's but you still need the players to remember them because they're still important. When their brother comes around and looking for revenge 10 months later. So I mean, I know I go on about this a lot, but I think it's really important. It's something I don't always succeed as well as I would like to, but I always try to work at it, is getting my NPCs to be memorable and stick in the players' minds, and using whatever technique I can within the context of like why they're there, with why the players are interacting with them, to make them memorable. And again, I'd say don't be afraid to be a little bit campy. That's I love villains and I love NPCs that are extreme. And it's not because you're not trying to wow the players with the coolness factor. You're trying to make it stick in their mind, and you're trying to make them laugh a little bit. That's really what it is. It's not. These aren't. When you have a character that's over the top, and cuts off his own father's head, as when he meets the party, something like that. That isn't. You're not trying to shock them into if they're all adults and they've played these games and they've seen enough movies, that's not going to shock them anymore. The point is to make it stand out in their mind so that they remember the character, and that maybe there's a little bit of, I mean, that breaks tension. That's the kind of thing that, you know, is maybe going to elicit a little bit of a chuckle from people. So that's kind of what you're trying to get. You're trying to get that sort of thing. Every once in a while, you will truly shock them. Once in a while, an NPC will do something, and it'll really shock them. But I think, like horror, like a lot of these other really intense emotions, that kind of shock is you kind of have to bide your time, and the opportunity presents itself rarely. So again, I mean, the point isn't to shock them, though. You know, once in a while, you know, I've certainly had moments where the party's been surprised by an NPC's behavior. So yeah. So again, I think you know, you know, anything with you know, Chor Yuen as director, or Gulong as the you know, listed in the credits as either writing or having the story based on one of his novels. And again, I'm reading The Seventh Son again. I'm sorry, the 11th Son again, and by Gulong. And I'm gonna have another. I'm gonna talk about this maybe in the next few days. I think I don't know, about 150 pages in, and I wanted to reread it before I talked about it, just because it's still a little fresh in my mind, but it's so whenever you're really into a genre, it's so easy to mix up. Like when I think of like a Cheng Pei movie, I usually confuse it with 3 other Cheng Pei movvies and mix them all together. So it's not until I sit down and watch it again that I feel like I'm going to do a video on it. So same thing with this book. This is a really great book. You might want to pick it up even before I do the review, you know, if I don't, you know, or, you know, if you don't want to wait for me to persuade you to get it. But I think this is a really excellent read. And if you watch any of those combos that I'm talking about, a lot of them have characters from this book. And there's another book in this series that hasn't been translated into English officially. I think there are some fan subs or fan translations. But from those 2 books, you'll see characters in number of the Gulong Chor Yuen movies. So yeah. So I will hopefully be up with another video that's just a pure review of a movie, and then I'm going to do some more gaming stuff, and then I'll put up the 11th Son video blog. And if you have anything you want me to talk about, feel free. If there's anything you might disagree with, or if you want to correct my pronunciations on anything, I go almost entirely by text and by subtitles and stuff. So if I pronounce anything wrong, feel free to correct me, because I'd like to you know, have this be as informative as possible, and so I'm trying to use the notes to correct any inaccuracies in the video blogs, because I basically turn this on in the morning when I'm getting my wife ready for work, do the video blog, and then I go. And so I don't really do do-overs unless I got, like, you know, something really bad in the video, like a piece of salami hanging out of the side of my mouth. I won't bother to redo it. So there's usually a few little errors. So all right, I will talk to you later.